Welcome to Football Today Team Profiles and Previews. And today we are looking at the Seattle Seahawks, who came in our power rankings at 20th. They went 9-8 last year. I'm excited for this team. Offensively, they were 17th in scoring last year, but 10th in EPA per play. Defensively, not so good. 25th in scoring, 30th in EPA per play. But Pete Carroll's gone. They hired Mike Macdonald as their head coach, Ravens defensive coordinator, and there was Michigan's DC before that. And then as offensive coordinator, they hired Ryan Grubbs, who was the Washington Huskies offensive coordinator in their national championship runner-up run. And then defensive coordinator, they brought in Aiden Durd, who was a Dan Quinn disciple and a Cowboys defensive line coach. So they brought in a nice coaching staff. So fresh blood in Seattle after Pete Carroll retired after being their head coach since 2010. The team may not have the star power, but they just have good starters all over the roster. They play in a tough division, but this Seahawks team is exciting to me.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. Where I think taking a look at the Seahawks organization from a 1,000-foot perspective is kind of fun too, outside of what they just are building for 2024. Because the Seahawks have been a take 3 steps forward, 2 steps back team, the team over the last couple years, right? Where they unexpectedly win 9 games in 2022 with the Geno Smith coming out party. And then 2023, they finished with the same amount of wins, but it feels very unfulfilling and not knowing where to turn next. I love the move of transitioning Pete Carroll away from the head coach because we've seen time and time again, and this was kind of the main critique of Pete Carroll, time and time again, you see a year of some sort of offensive success for 1 year, and then it loses its mojo and its identity that made it good the year before. Now, this isn't to be too hard on Pete Carroll because efficiency wasn't the issue for the 2023 Seahawks. But basically, after they drafted JSN in the first round, the return in the offensive identity was not what you would have expected. Because let's look at the plays on all downs, Bobby. With Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN on the field together. Minus .04 EPA per play. And on all other plays, plus .05 EPA per play. They were way more successful running out of 12 personnel and 2 wide receiver sets than 3 wide receiver sets, and it was just strange. So I'm hoping McDonald's going to come in here, and especially for the defensive side, this is way more important for the defensive side, but even the offensive side too, it's worth talking about how they can get the most out of their best players.
Defensively, I think they're going to make a huge jump, and we'll talk about that. But offensively, right, there's this idea that Geno Smith had a down year for 2022. I don't think so. Like, I think his 2023 and 2022 were basically identical, but he missed 2 games. The touchdown rate was a little lower. Then you add Ryan Grubbs, who's going to want to push the ball down the field, who I think is a great fit for this offense, right? Like, Geno Smith will heat check you. He'll get the ball out on time to the right place, right? Like, he was 10th in pressure rate last year, but 5th best in pressure to sack rate. You know, he had the 9th best sack rate, so he was able to avoid that pressure. You know, he's also, the 5th best QB in pressure allowed, right? Like, he doesn't create any pressure himself. Like, other guys ahead of him in pressure to sack rate were Goff, who was 12th in pressure, Flacco 14th, Allen 39th, and then Mahomes 41st. Like, Geno is middle of the pack in deep pass rate, but he's like good when he does it, and he's not conservative at all, right? He was 10th and 4th in completion rate the last 2 years on 20 plus yard passes. His 14 touchdowns led the NFL in 2022. I like Geno, man. Like, I think he runs an offense well. I think he knows, when to throw to, the alert, how to avoid the blitz and stuff. Like, I think Geno's good, man. And I think this offense is going to, I don't think Shane Waldron was a bad offensive coordinator, but I do think Ryan Grubbs is going to bring a spark of life into that offense. And then defensively, we'll talk about it. I think that's where the biggest improvement is going to be.
Yeah, and I really want to talk about Mike Macdonald defensively and what he's done as a defensive coordinator with the Ravens in terms of just developing football players. But offensively with Ryan Grubb, I think there is a question of, hey, that Washington offense was not exactly how you're going to run an NFL offense, it being so vertical based. He had guys that can make contested catches. But I'll tell you what, look at the skill position players that the Seattle Seahawks do have. If you can have an offense that's based very vertically and it's based on some contested catches down the field, you want to know what offense could handle that? The Seattle Seahawks with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and JSN.
Oh, absolutely, right? Like DK Metcalf is still that guy for them to create explosives. He had 17 yards per catch last year, 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's also like Geno's go-to guy on third down versus pressure, right? Like whenever you're bringing pressure on third down, Geno is throwing to DK Metcalf, and they do it well, right? Like it's just like, oh my gosh, this guy's DK's blanketed. Nope, Geno puts it in a good spot. DK Metcalf's able to bring it down. Then Tyler Lockett had his first non-1,000-yard season since 2018. He still had 894 yards. He did show some decline last year, and he turns 32 this year, but I think he's still a good player for them. And then JSN, like viewed as kind of like a disappointing rookie season, but he had 63 catches, 628 yards, 70% catch rate. And that's going to be your slot, low average depth of target guy, right? Sixth lowest average depth of target in the NFL. 62nd out of 102 guys, receivers in yards per route run. So he's not going to set the world on fire, but I think he's going to handle that slot duties really well. So you have that nice three guys, and Geno, a guy who does spread the ball well, who does know, he's not going to pick favorites. He knows like, hey, I got a one-on-one or pressure, I'm going to throw the DK. Lockett on some, longer developing stuff, he's there. He's going to be a route runner on the outside, and then JSN to really, hold that quick game down. Like, I think this offense is going to be solid. We'll talk about the run game and the offensive line. There's some worries there, but at least the passing offense should be above average.
Yeah, but the challenge will be if you're going to be in 11 personnel, at least 60% of the offensive snaps, right? Which means your top three wide receivers are going to be out there and they're going to need to threaten a defense. Those three players being on the field together at the same time, JSN, Tyler Lockett, and DK Metcalf, they need to be better all together. Because even DK Metcalf in 2023, it was a step backwards for him. It was 4.1 catches per game. It was the lowest since his rookie year. 55.5% catch rate. That was a career low. And he was targeted on just 17% of passes versus zone coverage. And that was a career low for him as well. So again, efficiency-wise, you look at the Seahawks and it was fine and it was good. But just feel-wise, especially compared to 2022, where everything was clicking on cylinders, they need to figure some stuff out. And when their best players are all on the field together, how are they all going to be the best versions of themselves? And I am confident in this coaching staff being able to sort that out.
And I think they will do that with Ryan Grubbs. Like I think he's kind of the guy for Ryan Grubb. I think he's kind of the guy to take that to the next level, where they're a solid offense and can turn them into a good offense.
There's two things that will stop them, though.
The offensive line is worrisome, right?
Yeah.
Like Charles Cross needs to take the step forward. That's one thing. You lost Damian Lewis and Evan Brown. You replaced them with Nick Harris and Laken Tomlinson. Tomlinson, can he get like back to his own form? But I think the big thing is just Charles Cross needs to take that step forward, because he's been up and down as a 2-year player. He's missed some games too, but that's the biggest thing with his offensive line. We need Charles Cross to take that step forward.
Yeah, and even Abraham Lucas on the other side, right? Missed time last year. Stay healthy, but even he's allowed a lot of sacks and a lot of hits as well. Like their efficiency numbers were not great at all, but both of them were hurt. But that is a part of kind of the game, especially with the offensive line. And Geno Smith it very much reflected when he was under pressure. His numbers were not good. 25% pressure. 25% pressure rate last year. He averaged only 5.3 yards per attempt while completing 50% of his passes. The yards per attempt was 25th in the league. But when the pocket was kept clean, 8.4 yards per attempt, that was 5th best, and his completion percentage was 11th best. So when his pocket was clean, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And last year, Geno Smith, when his pocket was dirty, he was one of the worst, and it was not fun.
I'll even say this, a little influenced by him avoiding sacks so well, because and it fits well. Like I think, think of Michael Penix at Washington, where it's like sometimes he got, and a good part of this is Penix's fault, but like dinged up a bit because like, oh, look at this under pressure. It's like, well, he didn't take sacks. Like he learned how to avoid sacks. So like some of your quarterback box score stats look good, and you're like, well, he didn't get sacked a ton. Did he have a lot of that pressure? No, Geno had to deal with a lot of pressure, and he avoided it. But like you said, some of his numbers could suffer because of that, because he's not taking that sack, which, and 95% of people look at the sack number and blame it on the offensive line solely, and then most people, but in reality, it's partially a quarterback stat, not only a
I'd
quarterback
rather you
stat.
complete a 5-yard pass than to take a sack. So
Yeah. So
good
and a
on
lot
Geno
of guys
Smith.
are passing up that 5-yard pass and taking up a sack.
Yep.
So the offensive line, here's where I want them to really grow as an offense, though, right? Because I think passing game wise, they're going to be fine, and I don't think they were as bad last year. The run game, right? You look at it, you're like, oh, they have Kenneth Walker. That guy's sick. Zach Charbonnet, that's a nice piece. But Kenneth Walker is one of the more frustrating players in the NFL to me. He was 33rd in success rate in the NFL for running back. Charbonnet was 24th. Charbonnet had more yards per carry than him at 4.3 to 4.1. Those were ranked 20th and 26th in the NFL. And then you're like, well, Kenneth Walker, that guy makes guys miss, and he does, right? He makes a guy. He is 5th in missed tackles, forces a missed tackle, one forced missed tackle for every 3.9 snaps. Charbonnet 6.3. But Kenneth Walker drives me nuts because he spends so much time behind the line of scrimmage and creating negative runs. Like back-to-back years, if you look at next gen stats, the running back who spent the most time behind the line of scrimmage, he's second, right? Mm. And the guys who are first are the Browns in that really, really outside zone wide. So like no one runs it more than them. And it's just very frustrating because he does not hit the hole hard. He needs to grow as a back. He has all the talent in the world, and he's going to continue to put up highlight plays. But he's got to be better on a down-to-down basis because he's been the ultimate, boomer bust running back, and they need more efficiency out of Kenneth Walker. He's too good to be 33rd in success rate and having less yards per carry and just being worse in all the running back metrics than his backup running back, who I do like Zach Charbonnet a lot, but Kenneth Walker is much more talented than him.
Yeah, and even he had a positive rushing yards over expected per attempt in 2022 and then really negative in 2023. But something that his 2022 and 2023 seasons has in common from a stats standpoint is the percentage of runs that have been over expected for him. And this is next gen. They track, based on how many guys are in the box, nearest defender towards you, your formation you're in, et cetera, what you're expected to get on a given carry. It's a way to separate the running back's performance from the offensive line's performance. And the percentage of carries that he's been over expected to get, that he gains over expected, it's been one of the lowest in the league. So even though 2022 was really positive for him, the percentage of the carries that he was getting over expected was really, really low. And that's something that 2022 and 2023 had in common. And I think the main thing that I'm asking out of my rushing offense in today's NFL is to sustain yourself and to stay on schedule. Don't get me off schedule. If I'm going to choose, especially if I'm going to make the decision to run on a 2nd and long, I don't want to be having a 2nd and 10 turn into a 3rd and 7. Like that doesn't help my offense. So stay on schedule. You don't need to be a huge advantage and a plus, but just don't be a negative overall for the offense.
Yeah. So, but that's like you said, be a more efficient back and take what is there. Because again, you watch highlights, and you're like, oh, Kenneth Walker, one of the best backs in the NFL. But to me, he's the most frustrating back in the NFL because of how talented he is and how much he screws up on a down-the-down basis. Defensively, I think there's going to be so much growth here, right? Mike McDonald comes in, he's going to move pieces around and have them playing fast and fundamentally sound. That's a big thing right there. I think they'll dial down the 3 safety looks with this roster. But last year, they were a very basic defense that was easy to take advantage of. They had busted coverages. They had the 4th most missed tackles. They were awful on 3rd down in the red zone. And they shouldn't have been. They were way too talented to have that. I think they've added talent. I think their young guys they're not just, oh, let's hope this guy takes a step forward. Like, no, they're guys who have shown good stuff, and you can reasonably see them making growth. I think this defense is going to be one of the biggest jumps in rankings when we look at this next year, right? Like last year, they were 25th in points per game. I'd be shocked if they're not top 12 next year.
Top 12.
There's too much talent on this roster. Now it's not a defense that's loaded with stars, but tell me the weak spot of this defense.
I can't.
There's really not, right? Like this on the front. I love the interior group, right? Leonard Williams leads the way, who was 11th in sacks, and pressures for defensive tackles. Jaron Reed is at nose tackle is very underrated, right? He can be. He's one of the better defensive tackles. Draymond Jones is a solid piece. And then they added Byron Murphy in the draft out of Texas, right? Like he should be a guy who has day one impact for them. On the edge, they're not the best group, but you got Boye Mafe and Uchenna and Wosu who are like that's a solid duo. I want Mafe to make an even greater strides than what he did in his second season. And then linebacker Jerome Baker, I like him, but I think he is a downgrade from Jordan Brooks. And then they added Terrell Dodson from the Bills, right? Was 8th in run stop rate for linebackers last year, while being one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. And then coverage wise, they're ready to go. Devin Witherspoon was phenomenal for them last year. And he's someone you can use. Like Mike McDonald's going to love him, right? He played 40-60 outside and nickel, so you could play him at both spots. He essentially had 2 bad games as a rookie. His first game versus the Lions, and then versus the Cowboys. Like he's an amazing run defender, good blitzer. Like I think he might make all pro this next year. And then, everyone's like, oh, Reek Woolen had a down year. And he did in a sense, but because he didn't have all the interceptions for them, but like he was good. He had a lot of penalties and missed tackles, but he also had 10 pass breakups. The longest catch he gave was 32 yards. And then we know Julian Love, Justin. His nickname from, Joe Judge was duct tape. Mike McDonald's going to love this. He might be Mike McDonald's favorite player because you can put him all over the field.
So versatile.
There's no spot on this defense that you say weak spot. Now you can look at this whole defense and say, where's this great, this great unit where you'd rank it top 5 in the NFL. But I think the secondary can be that. And I think they're going to be extremely well coached, where I don't think they were getting the most out of them last year.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with Mike McDonald, and that's where you have to be most excited about him as a coach and the staff that he's put together. By the way, Leslie Frazier is the assistant head coach of this staff. So if you want to talk about this staff, largely is an inexperienced coaching staff. But then you have Leslie Frazier, who's been there, done that, been everywhere.
And they've got all different flavors, right?
Yeah.
You have Mike McDonald, who lives in the, moving the safeties around, disguise looks type of stuff. You have their defensive coordinators from the Cowboys who cover 1, cover 3, blitz and come at you. And then Leslie Frazier, who is kind of like the 4 down, rush 4, sit back. So like you have, hopefully it's not too many voices, but like you have coaches who have succeeded at every different type of playing defense.
And McDonald, what he did in Baltimore is guys had career years and guys got big paydays. Geno Stone, who was like their number 3 safety last year, was one of the top leaders in interceptions last year. Kyle Hamilton has looked like an all-pro player. Patrick Queen, who was terrible before Mike McDonald got into town, is now getting almost $20 million a year. Justin Amatabuke, now seen as one of the best interior defensive linemen in the National Football League. Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney have these career resurgent years that absolutely just came out of nowhere. Who saw that coming with that unit? So, Devin, like you said, like, oh, there's no superstars on the team. I think Devin Witherspoon.
Yeah, Witherspoon
can already
is
be a
the
superstar.
One. Like I said, I think he can be all pro.
I think Tyreek Woolen kind of played like an all pro his rookie year. I think that is still somewhere in there, as long as, and I don't know him, we're not Seahawks fans, so as long as his head is screwed on straight and he's there and he's with it, I think he has all-pro talent as well. And even that front, like I think Jaron Reed, I don't know nose tackles like the back of my hand, but based on some of the metrics and things that I've seen, it's Dexter Lawrence and Jaron Reed that are some of the more effective pass rushers from the nose tackle spot, right? And they have Jonathan Hankins, who I love, who has just been a glue guy at nose tackle and interior D-line as the years have gone on, and obviously he's a little bit older too. So you went up and down this defense, man, and I agree. It's a dangerous unit, and it's Mike McDonald who's here, who what he has done best in Baltimore and everywhere that he's gone is he's gotten the best out of his players, and that's what you want your coach to do.
These guys are going to know their roles, and they're going to play them fast, and that's what you want to do as a defensive coach, is get your guys playing in the right place and doing it fast. And I think they're absolutely going to do that. There's no weak spot on this defense. Like we've been doing these previews, and you're like, this is the thing that could hold this team back. Tell me what part of the Seahawks team can hold them back. Their offensive, and let's just talk about the team as a whole. Their offensive line, yes. But they're far from the worst offensive line in the NFL. They're not a debilitating, they're not an offensive line that's stopping you from operating as an offense. And it's like, we want more of their running game, but we talk about how like that should be one of the best 1-2 punches as Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. So like I think they are like really balanced all across the line. Like even some of their like even Pharaoh Brown. We even talk about the tight ends of Fant and those guys. Like Pharaoh Brown, they bring him from the Patriots. Like it was like kind of like a low key, would have like a 20-yard catch like once a game, right? Didn't do much else, but like excited to see if they can get something out of him. Kayvon Wallace, right? Used a lot in those 3 safety sets with the Cardinals last year. We'll see if he can do that with Seattle. Rayshon Jenkins, obviously they lost Quandre Diggs. That hurts, but like I think that they're good. And, and their draft class has got guys that could come in and contribute. Like, let's look at their new additions and loss.
Yep.
So QB Sam Howell, George Fant to be is back in Seattle as a backup tackle. Laken Tomlinson and Nick Harris, tight end Pharaoh Brown, defensive tackle Jonathan Hankins, linebacker Jerome Baker and Terrell Dotson replace Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks, and then safeties Rashawn Jenkins and Kayvon Wallace. They lost Drew Lock. They lost their guards Damian Lewis and Evan Brown. They lost Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks, and then Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. I would have liked to see Jamal Adams with Mike McDonald, but I don't think any Seahawks fan is crying about losing him.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think they stayed pretty flat, right?
But again, it's where it's the draft class that you feel good with some of these names.
And again, they didn't have great draft capital, right? Like Byron Murphy, he's going to be a day 1 contributor for them out of Texas. 3rd round, they get Christian Haynes. I think that guy should come in and compete to start at guard right away.
I think he will.
Tyrese Knight, a linebacker in the 4th round. AJ Barner, the tight end in the 4th round. Guys that I think can have a role, but not going to be like plus starters for you. Nehemiah Pritchett in the 5th round corner. Sato Loemu, Lamea, offensive lineman. DJ James in the 6th round out of
DJ
Auburn.
James.
Like if there's any team that's been able to get the most out of their day 3 DB picks, that could be one. I'm not familiar with Pritchett. And then Michael Jarrell in the 6th round. I like this team a lot. Like, I got to redo power rankings to see exactly where I have them, but I like them. Now, the issue is that I also have them 3rd in their division after the 49ers and the Rams.
Yeah, that's the issue for me. And
but they're one Stafford injury away from being the 2nd team in the division.
I put myself in an interesting situation where I picked the Cardinals to even get over in wins too. So somebody's got to finish in last. Maybe this division's just super fun and interesting where you have the Seahawks and the Cardinals getting better. And then you maybe have, hey, the Rams are without fucking Aaron Donald. Stafford could get hurt. And Trent, you have some aging guys on the 49ers too on that offensive side of the ball that they heavily rely on. Rely on.
Who knows? Who's your X factor for this team?
It's Tyreek Woolen. You have Devin Witherspoon in the slot. And, while you see some of the best receivers in the NFL, they're in 30% in the slot. That still means that you're going to have an outside wide receiver that's going to largely be on the outside. Your number 1 wide receiver is going to be largely on the outside, right? So Tyreek Woolen, if you can go back to, not even go back to what he did his rookie year, because all those pick sixes and 6 interceptions, something like that. I feel like the bar was raised maybe a little too high because I didn't feel like last year was too bad unless, hey, I don't watch Tyreek Woolen every down. So maybe his run defense was bad and he had a high missed tackle rate, right? That was just abysmal. But if he can come back to be a number 1 cornerback in the NFL, changes everything with that Seahawks defense, it'll help make everybody else so much better.
I think he will bounce back. My X factor is Julian Love, right? A guy who can move around in every spot on the defense. Made a Pro Bowl last year for the Seahawks. Pro Bowl voting is not the best thing in the world, but Mike McDonald's going to love that guy because he's going to be able to teach him anything, put him anywhere. And if Julian Love can be a guy who creates some turnovers, plays some really good run defense, I think that could be good. Over under 7.5 wins, which to me is the lowest over under that we've done for what my expectation is.
They have the Broncos and the Pats to start the season and the Giants, week 5. I'm putting myself in a pickle if I go over, but I'm going to go over. I believe in them.
It's over for the Seattle Seahawks, and it's over for this episode. That is the Seattle Seahawks, and this is Football Today.